Welcome to Last Minute Lecture. This free chapter overview is designed to help students review and understand key concepts. These summaries supplement, not replace, the original textbook and may not be redistributed or resold. For complete coverage, always consult the official text.
Right now, inside your leg, there is this single microscopic cell that is roughly 3 feet long.
Yeah, it's wild to think about.
I mean, it is just one unimaginably thin biological thread stretching all the way from the base of your spinal cord, down your thigh, right to your knee. And if a doctor taps your knee with a little rubber hammer, that single cell fires an electrical bolt so fast that your foot kicks out before your conscious brain even registers what happened.
It really is a phenomenal piece of biological engineering. I mean, we experience it as a simple, almost comical reflex at a routine physical...
Right, the classic knee jerk.
Exactly. But that instantaneous kick to patellar reflex is actually one of the most profound windows we have into human physiology. It reveals exactly how our bodies are wired.
Well, welcome to this custom-tailored deep dive. We are unpacking the electrochemical magic of the nervous system, crafted specifically for you, the listener. Our mission today is to trace this process from start to finish. We're diving right into Chapter 1 of Cellular Physiology of Nerve and Muscle, the 4th edition.
Yes, a fantastic text.
And we are going to look at the central concept of electrical signaling. We're translating these really dense cellular mechanisms into an unbroken causal chain in the exact order they appear in the book.
And we're going to use that doctor's office scenario to do it. By tracking that simple tap on the knee, we can explore how basic cellular properties create resting electrical potentials.
Right.
And then how a physical stretch sparks an active signal, how that signal leaps across the gaps between cells, and how it ultimately commands a muscle to contract. Every single step relies on the one right before it.
So if this stretch signal has to travel all the way from the thigh up to the spine and back again in a fraction of a second, we first have to understand the physical circuit. Before we look at the cells, let's walk through the macroscopic routing of this reflex.
Okay, let's do it.
When the doctor's hammer taps your patellar tendon, that's the connective tissue just below your kneecap, it physically pulls the kneecap downward.
Which naturally means whatever's attached to the kneecap gets pulled as well. So in this case, it's the quadriceps, right? That massive muscle sitting at the front of your thigh.
Exactly.
If you look at the schematic in figure 1.1 of the text, it outlines this perfectly. The hammer strike passively stretches the quadriceps. The muscle isn't choosing to do this. It's being elongated by an outside mechanical force.
Right, it's just being yanked.
Yeah, and that sudden, unexpected stretch is the crucial mechanical trigger for absolutely everything that follows.
The body obviously needs a way to monitor when its muscles are being suddenly stretched out like that. So embedded right there in the quadriceps are specialized sensory nerve cells.
And their whole job is just to detect that mechanical stretch.
Right. Once they feel it, they generate an incoming signal that races up their long, thin fibers out of the leg and straight into your spinal cord. This incoming route is what the text calls the afferent pathway.
The nervous system acts as a highly efficient routing network. So once that afferent signal hits the spinal cord, the data has to be processed. The spinal cord essentially acts as a relay station here.
Okay.
The incoming sensory neuron delivers its message to an entirely different set of neurons waiting inside the spine, which are the motor neurons.
So the sensory neuron catches the incoming problem, and the motor neuron is tasked with sending the solution.
Precisely. The motor neuron generates a brand new command signal. It sends this outgoing message down its own massive fiber, traveling all the way back down the leg to the exact same quadriceps muscle.
Wow, back to the start.
Yeah. The command tells the muscle to violently contract. That active contraction pulls the lower leg up, extending the knee joint, and you get that famous kicking motion. This outgoing route is the efferent pathway.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's basically like an automatic thermostat for your muscles.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, like if you have a thermostat set to 70 degrees and someone suddenly opens a window in winter, the sensor detects that sharp drop in temperature, the passive change, and immediately kicks on the furnace.
The active response.
Exactly, to counteract it and return the room to stability. Here, the nervous system senses a sudden stretch and instantly triggers a contraction to oppose it. The whole purpose of this reflex loop is to ensure the muscle's length remains perfectly stable.
That is the ultimate biological why behind the reflex. The body wants to maintain physical stability without requiring your conscious brain to constantly micromanage every single muscle fiber.
That would be exhausting.
Right. The loop is elegant.
Mhm.
You detect a stimulus, transmit it rapidly over a long distance, process it centrally, and send an immediate countercommand to a specific target.
Now that we have the overall map, up the leg, into the spine, back down to the muscle, we have to look at the actual biological hardware. How are these individual wires built to carry such rapid messages without losing the signal?
Because form always follows function.
Always. So let's look at the structure of these neurons themselves. The text breaks this down beautifully in figure 1 to 2.
Yeah, the structural complexity is striking, especially when we look at figure 1-2A, which shows the motor neuron. That's the one sending the command from the spine down to the muscle.
Right, the efferent one.
Exactly. Now, a neuron has a main control center called the cell body, or the soma. This is where the nucleus lives. For this motor neuron, the soma is remarkably tiny.
Like, how tiny?
Only about 20 to 30 micrometers in diameter. And it sits safely tucked away inside the protective casing of the spinal cord.
But just sprouting out from that tiny soma is a dense, massive web of branching filaments called dendrites. They spread out for millimeters within the spinal cord. If the soma is like the trunk of a tree, the dendrites are this vast, intricate root system.
And those dendrites are highly specialized biological receivers. They are specifically designed to catch signals passed along by thousands of other neighboring neurons in the spine.
Okay.
They funnel all of that incoming data from the surrounding network directly into the tiny soma for processing.
But the soma also sprouts a completely different type of structure, right? A single, incredibly thin cable called an axon. And this axon is specialized purely for long-distance transmission.
And when we say long distance, we really mean it.
Yeah, we are talking about a microscopic thread stretching from the lumbar region of your spine all the way down your leg to connect with the quadriceps. That single cell is roughly a meter long.
It totally challenges our normal conception of what a cell is.
Yeah.
We usually picture cells as microscopic little blobs.
Right, like little water balloons.
Yeah. But here is a single contiguous living unit stretching a full meter. Now compare that motor neuron to the sensory neuron figure 1-2B, the one carrying the initial stretch signal from the leg up to the spine.
The structural blueprint changes significantly there. Looking at the layout in the figure, the sensory neuron is built differently. For one, its cell body isn't inside the central spinal cord itself.
Right, it's outside.
It sits just outside the spine in a cluster. The terminology of the text uses here is the dorsal root ganglion. But what exactly does that mean? Like, what is a ganglion in this context?
Good question. A ganglion is simply a biological term for a concentrated cluster of nerve cell bodies located outside the central nervous system.
Okay, got it.
Think of it as a small junction box sitting just outside the mainframe of the spinal cord. The sensory neuron's cell body sits in this junction box, and from there, it gives rise to only one single nerve fiber, one axon. But this axon does something totally unique.
It splits.
Yes, it immediately splits into two distinct branches.
Almost like a T-junction.
Exactly. One branch extends all the way out to the peripheral thigh muscle to act as the physical stretch detector. The other branch reaches inward into the spinal cord to deliver the message to the motor neuron's dendrites.
Wait, I have to stop you there and push back on something based on the text.
Okay, go ahead.
We just established that dendrites are the antenna of a cell. They're the structures designed to receive information. But looking at figure 1-2B, the text explicitly says the sensory neuron lacks dendrites. It just has a soma and a split axon.
Right.
So why wouldn't a sensory neuron need a web of receivers? How is it supposed to sense anything from the outside world without its biological antenna?
That is a brilliant question because it forces us to look at how different cells receive information. The motor neuron needs dendrites because it is sitting inside the spinal cord, bathed in a chemical soup, waiting to receive complex chemical messages from an entire network of upstream neurons.
Right. It needs a wide net to catch all those chemicals.
Exactly. The sensory neuron, however, is detecting a completely different type of stimulus.
It's detecting physical tension.
Right. It receives its physical stimulus, the actual mechanical stretching of the muscle, at the far peripheral tip of its axon down in the leg.
Oh, I see.
It is not sitting in a network waiting to receive chemical signals from other neurons at its cell body. The sensory neuron's job is simply to feel a physical pull at the end of its wire and send a signal up the other end. Because it isn't receiving chemical messages at its cell body, it just doesn't need dendrites. It would be wasted biological energy.
Form follows function perfectly. Okay, so we have these meter-long axons acting as biological wires. But what exactly is the signal traveling down them?
Well, it's not like water flowing through a pipe.
Right, and it's not a copper wire conducting raw electricity either. If we really want to understand the causal chain, we have to look at the electrical properties of the cell membrane. Here's where it gets really interesting.
This is where we get into the fundamental mechanism of nervous system communication. Neurons transmit information using active electrical signals, but these signals are actually just rapid changes in the electrical voltage difference across the cell's outer skin.
The cell membrane.
Yes, the cell membrane. It acts as a barrier, physically separating the inside of the cell from the outside fluid.
To visualize this, the text describes a really cool experimental setup in Figure 1.3a. Imagine we take an ultrafine microscopic probe, an intracellular microelectrode. It's essentially a tiny voltage sensor hooked up to a voltmeter, kind of similar to what you'd use to test a AA battery in your garage.
But microscopic.
Very microscopic. We take this probe and physically pierce the outer membrane of the sensory nerve fiber down in the leg.
So the tip of the probe is sitting directly in the intracellular fluid inside the cell. And we have a reference point sitting in the extracellular fluid outside the cell.
Right. And if both probes were outside, the voltmeter would just read 0. There would be no difference. But the absolute millisecond that probe pierces the membrane and goes inside,
the voltmeter suddenly registers a charge.
Yes. It shows that the inside of the sensory nerve fiber is inherently negative compared to the outside. Specifically, it sits at about negative 70 millivolts. That is 70 thousandths of a volt.
It seems like a tiny charge, but it is the energetic foundation of human movement.
Definitely. As long as you aren't tapping the knee, as long as the muscle is perfectly relaxed, that voltage just sits there, rock steady at negative 70. This is what we call the resting potential.
And we should clarify how it maintains that resting potential. The cell membrane isn't just an inert plastic bag. It is actively pumping positively charged ions, like sodium, out of the cell while bringing other ions in.
Oh, so it's doing actual work.
Constantly. It's deliberately hoarding a negative charge inside, creating an electrochemical gradient. The membrane is like a dam holding back a massive reservoir of water. The cell is expending energy to hold those ions apart, creating stored potential energy.
It's like a coiled spring. That negative 70 millivolts is a state of constant tension, the resting potential. The cell is fully loaded, just waiting for a reason to release it. Which brings us to what happens when the doctor's hammer finally falls.
When the muscle is stretched, that mechanical force physically tugs on the membrane of the sensory nerve down in the thigh. And if you look at the graph trace in Figure 1.3b.
Right, the graph of the action potential.
Exactly. If we were watching our voltmeter over time, we would see a flat line at negative 70. But the moment of the stretch, that resting potential undergoes a sudden dramatic jump in the positive direction.
The line on the graph shoots straight up.
It does. It blows right past 0, briefly reverses its sign so the inside of the cell becomes positive, and then almost instantly drops right back down to the negative resting level.
This massive, lightning-fast vertical jump on the graph is the action potential. That spike is the long-distance signal racing up your leg.
And the mechanism behind that jump is fascinating. We call this depolarization. Remember that dam holding back the water?
Yeah.
The mechanical stretch of the muscle physically pulls open tiny pores in the cell membrane. Suddenly, all those positively charged sodium ions that were locked outside come rushing into the cell.
The spring is released?
Exactly. The sudden influx of positive charge is what flips the voltage from negative 70 to positive. But it only lasts a fraction of a millisecond before the cell pumps them back out and resets the system. And that momentary flip of voltage triggers the neighboring section of the axon to do the exact same thing. And then the next section. And the next.
Yeah.
The action potential is a self-propagating wave of electrical depolarization traveling the entire 1 meter length of the axon at incredible speed.
So mapping out our causal chain so far, basic cellular properties like pumping ions to create a barrier maintain the resting voltage.
Right.
That baseline tension allows the cell to be excitable. And that excitability is what allows the cell to fire an action potential when the muscle is stretched. Every step is perfectly linked.
But that journey brings us to a major physiological hurdle. The action potential races down the meter-long sensory axon, heading into the spinal cord right toward the motor neuron. But these neurons are entirely individual cells.
They don't just physically fuse into one continuous tube.
No, they don't. There is a microscopic fluid-filled gap between them. So when this electrical shock wave reaches the absolute end of the sensory axon, how does the signal cross the physical gap to alert the motor neuron?
Right. An electrical current can't just jump through biological fluid like a spark plug. It has to be translated. This brings us to the synapse, which is beautifully detailed in figure 1 to 4.
The synapse is the specialized point of contact where signals are transmitted from one cell to another. And in our reflex circuit, there are two crucial synapses.
The first is in the spinal cord, where the incoming sensory neuron meets the dendrites of the motor neuron.
Right.
And the second is down in the thigh, where the end of the motor neuron meets the actual muscle cells to command the contraction.
Both of these junctions are chemical synapses. Because the electrical action potential cannot cross the empty space, the language of the signal has to temporarily change from electrical to chemical.
Let's walk through that sequence of chemical transmission step by step, as shown in figure 1 to 4. First, the presynaptic action potential, that electrical wave we just tracked, arrives at the very end of the line. It hits the synaptic terminal of the sensory cell.
And when that electrical shock wave hits the terminal, it depolarizes it. That sudden change in voltage forces special channels to open, which triggers the cell to release packets of a chemical substance that have been waiting there.
Like ships at a dock.
Exactly. This chemical substance is a neurotransmitter.
So the electrical signal is officially converted into a chemical spray. These neurotransmitter molecules are dumped into the physical gap between the cells, called the extracellular space.
Right.
Because they are in a fluid, they physically diffuse across the tiny space separating the two cells. They drift over and bind to the outer membrane of the target cell, which we call the postsynaptic cell.
And this is where the translation happens again. The target cell, the motor neuron, has receptors on its dendrites that act like keyholes. The neurotransmitters are the keys. When they bind to those receptors, it changes the electrical potential of the postsynaptic cell.
It alters the resting potential of the second cell.
Precisely. Positively charged ions rush in. The chemical binding changes the local voltage. And if enough neurotransmitters bind, it affects the target cell's firing of its own action potentials. It pushes that second cell past its tipping point,
Causing the motor neuron to fire off its very own action potential, continuing the chain reaction down its own axon. So what does this all mean?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it illustrates the text's core thesis perfectly. Because signaling involves these membrane voltage changes and chemical translations, the brain is fundamentally an electrochemical organ.
An electrochemical organ. I love that. If we distill the entire causal chain for the listener, the logic is stunning. Electrical spike, chemical spray across the gap, new electrical spike, physical muscle contraction.
It is a flawless translation of energy. You can't separate the electrical potential from the chemical transmission. They drive each other in an endless loop.
So to summarize what we've learned today from Chapter 1, basic cellular properties maintain a resting voltage. That excitability allows an action potential when the muscle is stretched. This signal travels down the axon, triggers chemical synapses, and results in the motor neuron firing, which causes the muscle contraction. Every single step is perfectly connected.
Understanding this pathway gives you the foundational principles required to comprehend everything else the nervous system does. The mechanisms of ion channels, voltage changes, and neurotransmitter release are the exact same mechanisms allowing you to process the words I'm saying right now.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to ponder long after we wrap up today. This entire lightning-fast electrochemical loop, the mechanical sensors, the meter-long biological wires, the shifting ions, the action potentials, the synapses, all of it evolved just to oppose a passive stretch.
Yeah, it exists simply to keep your knee joint stable when your center of gravity shifts and you aren't paying attention.
Exactly. So imagine for a second the immense, incomprehensible cascade of electrical spikes and chemical releases happening across billions of synapses right now, just for you to take a single conscious step out of that doctor's office.
The sheer scale of the computation is just staggering.
We want to end with a warm, encouraging thank you for joining us today, specifically from the Last Minute Lecture team. We hope this deep dive translated these dense mechanisms into a sequence you can clearly visualize and remember.
Thanks for listening.
So next time you feel that little rubber hammer tap your knee, you'll know exactly what's racing up and down your spine. Stay curious and keep learning.